Welcome to Dream, Declare, Deliver with Chris Carell and Candace Ogren. Join us each week as we explore how to live a life by design and turn inspiration into realization.
Hello and welcome back to Dream, Declare, Deliver, designing the life of your dreams with Candace Ogren and my dear friend Chris Carell. We are here not only as friends, but also as co-authors of the book Typhoon Honey, The Only Way Out is Through. And we were just having a conversation before recording today about the importance of daring. The importance of daring, and you know, we would be remiss in talking about Dream, Declare, Deliver if we didn't talk about what it means to dare, and what it means to recognize your boundaries and then push through them. And so we're going to have a conversation about that today, about what that looks like, and about you know what it means to dare and how to do it. And I'll start off with a quote and then we can jump in, Chris. But the quote that Chris and I were talking about, my husband actually sent this to me this week. And he said, you know, this is really sitting on my heart. And the quote is, "It's not because the things are difficult that we do not dare. It's because we do not dare that they are difficult," from Seneca. And so, Chris, what does that saying mean to you?
So much. I mean, there's so many things to unpack there. You know, the first thing that occurs to me is, you know, what holds me in place is my fear. You know, when I did a really thorough analysis of who I am and why I do what I do, and I'm working on another book called Learning to Feel, you know, the thing that I noticed was how fear-based I was, you know, that, you know, and I'd always gone through life, you know, I'm a big man. I'm 6'3", 220. And, you know, I always thought, you know, I don't fear anything. I used to play rugby in New York City in Central Park at nighttime and walk home, you know, through Central Park, you know, like I don't have any fears. But when I did that deep analysis,
very manly.
Very manly. Yeah. But when I did that analysis, you know, when I peeled back and looked at all those layers, what was driving me and what was really being projected as not having fear was that I was so fear-based. And so the first thing that strikes me about Seneca's quote is that, you know, I have to step into that fear. I have to have the guts to face what's scary. You know, and it's not that life is scary that, you know, that I don't do that. It's that I haven't taken the dare. I haven't, you know, and life keeps showing up to me as saying, all right, dare you to do this. You know, so I step through that and it goes, oh yeah, well, I dare you to do this. You know? And so it is about daring, you know, what Brené Brown calls daring greatly, really stepping into that. I guess that's my first reaction to it. But there's so many things that, you know, so many things that you can pull out of that quote, though. What shows up for you?
I think that something you said that I was just reading a children's book to my son this week called Grasper, and in this children's book, there's a crab that molts and loses a shell, and his friends all say, well, while you're soft, don't go outside the rocks because it's unsafe. And he does, and he goes outside the rocks and he meets a giant crab, and he says, how'd you get to be so giant? And the crab said, because I went outside the rocks. And he said, well, my friends have molted many times and they're still small. He said, well, if you stay in your safe place, you'll always stay small. Mm-hmm. And so I think first we need to, you know, for me, what came up was identifying where I'm staying small, identifying where I'm fear-based or where I'm setting up boundaries based on keeping myself safe. Mm-hmm. And I see that a lot in with finances, like making decisions that are safe. I see it a lot in my work relationships, you know, not daring to say what's really on my mind because I'm afraid of losing my job or even in, you know, in my romantic relationship as well. So where are you keeping yourself safe? Where do you see yourself, staying small?
You know, I live in this story that I'm turning 74 this year, you know, and
74 years young.
Yeah. And so I have this story that I've done enough, And so where I keep myself small is when I have that thought come up that, well, like you've done a lot of work in your life. You've done, gone places, you've done things, you've really pushed through boundaries. You don't need to do anymore. And that's such a lie, because what keeps me alive and vital is taking the dares, is really looking at where's my boundary now. I'm inside this safe corral, and there's a fence the whole way around it. And all those places where I grow are on the other side of the fence, and so I have to keep reminding myself that there's still a fence there, that I want to keep safe and protected. And that I need to step beyond the fence. So when things come up that challenge me, my first reaction is, oh, I've done enough work. And then my second reaction is, no, that's not the truth. The truth is I'm going to grow and develop and keep expanding until the last breath I take. That's my mantra is like, grow or die. That's it, So yeah, I see it showing up a lot. I think it, as you said in your love relationship, I have the fortune of being married to, excuse me, a very strong, powerful, and articulate woman, and she challenges me to be my greatest, to be the best I can be at all points. I'm going to sneeze.
Well, you can sneeze, and we're all a fan of Sarah's, so I'm glad she challenges you. And it's interesting. Like, I actually was just thinking about daring is not always doing. And you mentioned, like, I'm retired, and so I'm saying I've done enough work, and so pushing yourself is potentially still taking that additional step. For me, and I think that for many of our listeners, doing is not the problem. Like, I could do all day long, and that doesn't actually solve a lot for me. And so, as you know, Chris, I sold a business in June of this year, of last year, and that was a really hard decision. Because it for me, at first, I had a story about failure, that like selling the business or merging the business with another company would be a failure. And then I realized that by doing so much, like constantly doing, every hour of my day was filled between a full-time job and a business I was running, that my family was suffering. My son wasn't getting attention that he really needed. And so for me, actually, like, pulling back, slowing down, taking a breath, that's daring by itself, because as a doer, I think a lot of people I know, we tend to fill our time because of fear of intimacy, because we don't have very close, deep relationships. And so I was doing constantly, and it's because I didn't know how to necessarily be a full-time loving mom and wife. So daring could mean surrender. It could mean letting go. There was you had a quote, Chris, that I thought would be helpful for this conversation today, with the lessons that are tied to the
right
challenge.
But before I move on to that, it's and I just lost the thought I had, but you were talking about how we fill our time with action all the time, and I have to remind myself that that's a defense mechanism that I use. That when I find myself in do, I'm really trying to fill my time. I'm actually doing that on purpose as a defense mechanism, to not have to go inward and to go deep, and really think, well, why am I so filled with action and results orientation? Because I think it's an addictive process. We can say, at least, instead of doing the hard work, instead of, at least stepping forward and taking the dare, I fill my time with actions and results, and I can point to them and say, look, see, I did all this, I got that and that and that done. Yeah, I didn't get to the real important thing, but I got a lot of stuff done. And, so I look at the world as a teacher, and that these challenges, these dares that I think the world shows up to us with, are lessons in growing and how to learn. And so everything that I experience is an opportunity for me to learn something. And the quote that I was talking about earlier, it goes like this: anything that annoys you is teaching you patience. Anyone who abandons you is teaching you how to stand on your own 2 feet. Anything that angers you is teaching you forgiveness and compassion. Boy, that's a big one for me. Anything that has power over you is teaching you how to take your power back. Anything that you hate is teaching you unconditional love. Anything that you fear is teaching you courage and how to overcome your fear. And anything you can't control, another big one for me, is teaching me how to let go. And, in all of those lessons, in all of those dares, from the universe, I find what the lesson is inside of that. And so if I approach it like, oh man, this is challenging, it's hard. And remember the Seneca quote, it's not hard because it's a challenge to me. It's a challenge to me because I haven't taken the dare. And so for me, it's looking at, okay, where's the lesson in this? What is it that I get to learn? I'm on vacation. I should tell everybody I'm on vacation.
You should show your beautiful.
I wish I could. It's very bright out there. But I am.
We can see it. We can see it. Beautiful. Yeah.
So I'm in Colombia, South America, in a Caribbean kind of resort area called Santa Marta. Getting here was fraught with challenges. I mean, and I'm here with my brother, and he's just a very, level-headed kind of easygoing guy. And so as we, had one challenge after another, it took, an hour to get through customs, another hour to get the car rental, squared away, and, all that kind of stuff. And then getting here, there are only main roads, like, divided highway. Anything that's not the divided highway is dirt. And so we got off on these side roads, and we're just, anybody else would be, I think, be frustrated, and the anger would start building up. And we were just laughing and saying, oh, this is a challenge, this is fun, what are we learning here? We're learning, where the real people live here. Mm-hmm. It's not in this beautiful condo. It's actually down there on the streets and, the dirt roads and stuff. And so yesterday we went out and we explored the back roads and, the side streets in the village, in Santa Marta. And it just was delightful to see families, together, and to see, the culture here is very friendly and family oriented. And yes, there's violence in Bogota and things like that, but we wouldn't have gotten to see that if we didn't take the dare that we saw thrown in front of us, the day we arrived. And so, when you take on that orientation of, what's the lesson inside the dare? What am I learning here? Things show up that are just totally beautiful and unexpected. And the lesson in that was, experience the people again. That's what I want to do when I travel, is I want to get to know the real people. I don't want to see the JW hotel and its beautiful beach with, everything manicured. I want to see, how people here live and get a chance to experience that. And, it's just been fun, not having good Spanish at all. I have like 5 working phrases, and my brother's a little bit better because he did a lot of work in South America, but trying to speak in Spanish, is, they smile and laugh and they go like, oh, over here. Yeah. So there's no English spoken here at all. It's really, everything's a challenge and everything's a lesson, so I'm learning Spanish real fast by immersion.
And I think one of the things that we like to give exercises and homework. And so one of the things that I would offer as an exercise during this call is to really, or this conversation is to really write down where you are challenged. Or where you have been in the last week. We have that this comes up a lot, but And for me, that often happens with interpersonal relationships, and recognize, okay, where am I running up against a boundary, either one that I set myself or someone else, right?
Yeah.
And usually I know my boundaries when I look around at the people in my life. And where is there an opportunity for me to do something that makes me uncomfortable? Mm-hmm. I was telling you that I was just in Florida with my son and visiting my mom and my stepdad, and it was a very tense trip. It was a very tense trip for Ivor and I, and I couldn't understand why. I could tell that there was edge between myself and my stepfather, and he just seemed really unhappy that we were there. And I talked about it with my mom, and I, not only was I struggling, but Ivor, as a 3-year-old, was really having a tough time. He was having temper tantrums, and he rarely has temper tantrums, and he was biting and kicking, and it's behavior that I'm really like unaccustomed to with him. And we had a full-on meltdown on day 3 of our day 4 trip. And I talked to my husband about it. And I said, I think that there's tension with my stepdad. And I think that Ivor is telling me, hey, there's tension here, fix it. You know, like, I don't like the situation, and I don't want Ivor to come to Florida every time and not be happy and not want to come. And so I said, okay, the opportunity is to have a hard conversation with my stepdad. You know, like we aren't warm and fuzzy. He married my mom after I was an adult, so we never had like a father-daughter relationship. He makes my mom very happy. That's all that's really mattered to me. But when we're in a close environment together, I want it to be loving for everybody. And so I had a conversation with him, and it was awesome. It was awesome. There were things that came up that have been bothering him about me for 10 years that I didn't know. And like, those things have been building up. And so that tension that I was feeling is not just tension for the week that we were there. It's tension that has been building for 10 years that I just wasn't aware of. And so, so the dare for that was to actually go have the conversation. I could have left. I could have grinned and bared it, you know, grinned and bore it. And I could have had Ivor say, I don't ever want to go back again, or fight me when we go to visit, you know, Nana again. But instead it was like, no, this is important. There's a lesson here, and I need to go figure out what that lesson is and try to resolve this before we go.
Right. So what you did was you experienced the border, the fence, the edge of where your comfort zone was, and you stepped beyond that. So if we go back to, like the exercise that we're talking about here, is think of it as like a wheel, a bicycle wheel with spokes on it. And each one of those spokes is a situation or a relationship or, work or, whatever. Try not to be so general, like saying relationships, but say the relationship with my spouse, the relationship with my family, the relationship with my coworkers, so each one of those is a spoke, and try to identify where that edge is. What's the boundary of the comfort? I'm okay up to here. I have a relative who I'm fairly progressive in my thought, and he's very, very conservative, and, other things that go along with that package. And so, we have a relationship that often is, has a boundary of, we don't talk about that here. We like in order to agree to be friends and friendly and in family gatherings, we just don't talk politics. And when I identify where that boundary is, what I did then with my brother-in-law was I said, we have more in common than we have disagreements on. Let's start with what we both, agree with, and let's talk about how we can talk. I want to know why you're a really smart man, why you believe what you believe. And maybe in my listening to that, I can find places where we can connect. Very uncomfortable because it was so charged. I mean, he gets so upset that the veins stick out on his neck when, it's like, and he starts shaking. And so the boundary there was really one boundary of listening. It was really, am I willing to listen to some conservative, hate-filled, and there is a lot of anger in him. Am I willing to listen to that and say, wow, I hear the anger. Nobody listens to you, do they? And it took his tension all the way down, to a level where we could have a really good conversation. So, with each of these spokes on the wheel, your career, your current job, like relationships and so on, your spirituality, your gender, things like, I'm male, and there's a lot about toxic masculinity in the current literature that's out there and stuff. And I experienced all that growing up. And that's a constant evolution for me to learn more, to practice more about what it means to be a man and to be masculine in 2023.
It's interesting. You said a couple things that really triggered me. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, right.
The first is that, oftentimes the answer to being daring is listening. It's not doing something. It's actually like, okay, what is the lesson in this for me? Let me go listen. Because, with Charlie, my stepdad, it was listening to him, because I left his house when he first married my mom. They made dinner and I left. And I didn't tell him why I was leaving. And he just saw it as like, wow, that was super disrespectful. And that's something that he held on to for 10 years. I never gave him an opportunity to tell me about it. I never asked him why there was tension in our relationship. And I never just sat and was quiet afterwards. I just kept filling my own story about why things weren't working. And I was like, I don't need a dad. He loves my mom. That's all that matters. And I always kept him at arm's length. When in reality, there were things that he was very, hurt by, was feeling protective of my mom about, and I never gave him an opportunity. So I think that listening by itself is daring. Because oftentimes, even when I'm in an argument with Andrew, I'll say, okay, I'm going to walk away now. And it's because I don't want to listen anymore. And so the real dare in that is like, Candace, just shut your mouth and just listen, because clearly there's something that there's a lesson that you need to hear. And then the second thing that I just heard you talk about was in modern masculinity, and you mentioned toxic masculinity, and Andrew and I were just talking about that. There was a podcast that recently came out talking about Andrew Tate and the stuff that he puts out there and into the universe, and what men hear when he's talking, and essentially, about women needing their place, and about, that just extreme machismo. And the reason for it is that a lot of men, back in my mom's generation or earlier generations, as long as a man could provide money, he was good. He'd find a wife, he had respect in the community, as long as he could provide money. But now that women can provide for themselves and make their own money, a man actually has to be interesting, and he has to have other skills and the ability to converse, and the money that a man makes now isn't as valuable as it once was, because there's more people making money now. And so there's not as much of a dichotomy between the man and the woman, and so that's the reason for it. And so the answer, when you're up against it, if you're there's a lot of young men who are struggling to make money, they're struggling to meet women, they don't have success in their minds, and they're angry about it. Right. And I think that's a real opportunity, one, for me as a woman, to listen. And
one for me as a man to listen. Right.
Yeah. And for, in any conversations I've had with Andrew, oftentimes it's around that. It's around this isn't the life that my mom and dad had. This isn't, I should be making more money than you, Candace. And, there's all of these things that we're both up against, because I feel like, why should I make less money than my husband? That doesn't make sense. Right. But we're often up against that in our relationship.
It's really funny that you crossed into this territory, because just before I got on the call, I got an email from a friend of mine, a business psychologist, who said she's writing an article on the mistreatment of girls in athletics. And what her question to me was, what do the boys learn about that? And are there any bullet points that I could give her from, from my work in men's work. And it's really funny because there's such a message, first off, seeing the mistreatment of girls, in athletics. Boys are learning a bad lesson about how to treat girls. But secondly, there's this subtle undercurrent of, I don't want to be girly because I'll get mistreated too. So there's this whole, undercurrent of machismo that they have to be tough and strong. I think it accentuates or amplifies the whole violence and mistreatment and that toxicity that we were talking about. And to bring us back to the theme, where's the dare? Where's the challenge that boys and men have to learn that the way we're treated in athletics is not right. We often show in motivational seminars. There's a really great scene from Meeting the Titans or Meeting the. Yeah, I think it was Meeting the Giants. No, Meeting the Giants. And it's called the death crawl. And it's like the coach is down there on the ground and he says, give me one more step, keep on going. But, on some level, that's extremely abusive, situation that he's put that player in and demanding more and more and more of him. We learned that. I learned that. And the dare for me is, how can I be a strong, powerful man and not that? Not that coach, not that player, but really take my strength and use it to heal the world and use it to heal relationships and to teach boys and men how to be with girls and women. I get to do that with my own son. So yeah. I think there's so much, and like I said, I see everything as a teaching opportunity, as a lesson for me to learn. And find out more about who I am and how to grow.
So I have a question for you, Chris. And I want us to kind of close with what happens when you take on the challenge? What happens when you do the uncomfortable thing? And what happens when you don't? So let's just take on the modern masculinity and toxic masculinity topic. So what is a challenge before you as a modern man that you have an opportunity to take on? What happens if you take it on, and what happens if you don't?
You can tell that these are not rehearsed questions.
I'm definitely not throwing you a softball. So
no. To unpack that question. So what happens if I don't take that challenge is, on one level, I stay safe, and on that same level, nothing improves. If I'm a constantly evolving human, and you're a constantly evolving human, then we can look at the world that's constantly evolving. When we don't take on that challenge, when I don't take on that challenge, I've not done my part to take the world the next step further in understanding. So, if we look at the history, over time of how men and women treat each other, and particularly how men have treated women over time, we're getting better and better, but we're still not there. And so what can I do? The challenge to me is, what can I do that's uncomfortable, that will grow me and allow me to teach the lesson? For years and years, I've loved that scene, the Brock scene of one more, give me one more, give me your best, because that's how I lived life. And so for me, it was like a big motivation as I've grown and evolved in my discovery. And this is recent, I've come to see, wait, behind that is some real abuse, and I'm not willing to participate in that kind of abuse anymore. And I'm not willing to allow others to do that around me. So it's uncomfortable as hell to say to a good buddy, I don't like that joke. That was not right. And you don't have the right to tell those kinds of sexist things in front of me. So,
yeah.
and it calls them forward.
There's something interesting that's coming up for me. And like, so in the conversation with my stepdad this week, if I had not taken it on, so it's because I took it on, there was healing that happened. There was healing that only happened for my stepdad and me, which that felt good. But more importantly, there was healing that happened for my stepdad and my son. Because up until we had the hard conversation, there was no interaction between my stepdad and my son for 3.5 days. But once that conversation happened, there was warmth, there was laughter, there was love that was shared. And like, so I guess for me, what it told me was, had I not had that hard conversation, it would have not only affected me, it would have also affected my son. It would have affected the story that my son makes up about step grandparents. Like it would have perpetuated on to the next generation had I not taken it on.
What strength did you build in exercising that muscle? And that's an exclamation point at the end. What strength you built in exercising that muscle. So, it's very challenging and uncomfortable to say to a buddy of mine, that's bullshit. Pardon me. That doesn't get to be around me, because I'm a stand for justice, and I'm a stand for equality. But I get stronger in taking that stand and going beyond the fence into the uncomfortable. And over time, my buddies respect me more for it. What you did in that situation was not only face your uncomfortable, but you healed a rift between you and your stepdad, and you strengthened the family and yourself. You got stronger, and everything, like when we look at life as those challenges as lessons that we get to learn, like on the other side of the fence, you get to turn around and look and say, that was incredible. Look at what you just did. You healed a family in one act. You healed a family.
And that's the opportunity that every person listening to this episode today has, is in just one act, you can heal a generation. You can heal multiple generations. You can change how a generation looks at a certain situation or scenario. And so just in daring, just in choosing to see your boundary and take yourself on and take the boundary on, you're creating an act of healing that is a ripple throughout the world.
You're not taking, like a mile-long hike beyond the boundary. You're taking the one step on the other side of the fence. And amazing things show up when you take the dare, when you see the lesson and enjoy it. So thank you for joining us on Dream, Declare, Deliver. And we hope you take on the challenge of the exercise and see where your fence is, and then one by one start ticking off, what's on the other side of the fence, and keep challenging yourself to take the dare and to learn the lesson. So thank you, and we'll see you all next time on Dream, Declare, Deliver.
Thank you.